Welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Cultural Perspectives. In this module, we are talking about historicizing disability. As you noticed in the previous lecture, I was talking about how people with disabilities were understood, conceptualized in India. I obviously did not refer the entire Indian context. I picked up Usha Bhatt's argument and how Usha Bhatt's argument was challenged by Anita Ghai. I am not saying that one is right or another one is wrong. I am just saying that they two are important thinkers and you must read these two people to understand how disability was conceptualized in India. I also referred Mahabharata and Ramayana, certain characters, to talk about disability in India. I also talked about Andaman Nicobar, some tribes who were very inclusive regarding people with disabilities or any other forms of differences. I also talked about Mauryan Empire, Buddhism, Ashoka king, who accepted people with disabilities or who had a very sympathetic attitudes towards humanity, towards people, towards animal, and they avoid non-violence. Right? So this is what I was trying to talk about, but let me, before I proceed further in this lecture, which is Histories of Disablement in India, I want to talk about for a second how do we look at Mahabharata and Ramayana. First and foremost, my methodology would be that when we talk about Mahabharata and Ramayana, we talk in the context in which they are produced, the time in which they were written or performed. For example, Tulsidas has written Ramcharitmanas, Valmiki has written Ramayana. So think about the time in which they are writing. Let's say, for example, today I am giving you a lecture by wearing a red shirt. After a point of time, suppose it become obsolete, outdated. It does not mean that I was not modern. You are reading my dress code not in the context, but out of the context. And that's a problem we have when we read any particular text. I am not here trying to eulogize either Mahabharata or Ramayana. No, that's not my attempt, that's not my job, that's not my concern when I am teaching you disability studies. But what I am trying to give you an understanding and thinking is that whenever we read a text, we must be aware the context, the time period in which it was written, the setting that we have. That's the one thing. Second important point is, we were not supposed to pick up just one character to talk about certain things. Because if you look at the entire text, any particular text, there are n number of characters. There are multiple characters that we have. So if there is a bad treatment with one person and we say that, oh, hey, look, that is how he was treated, that's not our point. What about other characters? How other characters were treated in the society? We need to think about this. We need to pay attention to these points. And third, when we are reading a text, we need to see also the development of the character from beginning to the end. Not just one chapter or one episode, and on that basis we draw a conclusion. If we do so, that becomes problematic. That's become obsolete. That's not true in the case of disability. So My concern over here is, when I am talking about disability studies in India, since India is a very complex, very diverse, so when we are looking at disability, we need to pay attention to different communities, languages, ethos, pathos to understand disability. So that would set us how are we going to read disability. Look at the slide first. Here I have prepared 3 charts, as you might have noticed in the second chart. This is the chart obviously taken from Shilpa Anand's article. So look at the chart and you will see that the first is talking about event subject, right? Chart number A or column A, let's say. Column B is talking about theme, concept and ideas. And column C is talking about, right, it talks about project or intent. So the first we have Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic traditions, miracle, blessing, curses, event and subject. Like this is an event, like the previous one. What's happening? What is the theme? What is the thematic framework? That's the point I'm making, right? What is the thematic framework when we are reading disability? Thematic framework means that, let's say for example, people with disabilities are treated as if they are part of charitable object, right? They are as a charity, we must do charity on them. So this is a theoretical framework we have applied whenever we read. The moment we look at disability people or people with disabled, we think, oh, they are just nothing, but you reduce to them as if they are meant for charity. So this is a theme, right? So charitable treatment of deformed person is a part of religious practice. Deformity as a result of past actions, like karma, right? Blessing or curse. Reverence of persons with deformity, pity is shown to person with deformities. So most of the time, okay, let's look at the content, intent as well. To describe and explain social attitude to disablement and disabled person in present times. To understand theological context and emergence of concept of charity, institutionalization, segregation and social stigma. Why I am talking about that? Let's say for example, why I am talking about religion, right? Why I am talking about religion? Because it's a religion that is going to set the tone for our intent, right? Let's say for example, when we say that someone must not be part of our rituals because so and so has happened or so and so has been said in so and so books, right? So there is a connection between religion and intent. You segregate a person, right? I don't want to tell you something, but let's say for example, I don't want to go into details, but there are certain rituals where widow women are not allowed to participate. In my culture, we have one ritual practice, or for example, puja I also can say. There what happens, the widow women are not allowed. I'm not going to talk in detail about it. And here it becomes the tradition that it's more for the fertile women. It's more about, it's a blessing for the new girl. So therefore, let's only take the blessings of those who have a prosperous, happy life. And the very idea of prosperous, happy life in some context means to have a husband. So let's not get into this intricacies for a second. But the point what I am making is that how you explain social attitudes, right? How do you understand it? So you go back and look at what has been said. Oh no, our ancestors also followed this, so I am also going to follow this. Look at this kind of attitude that we have. So our ancestor followed this, so I am also going to follow this. If it happened in this particular tradition, I am also going to do this. Oh, there is a saint who has said about people with disabilities and we cannot challenge it, so let's follow this. So you have to understand the theological context. You have to understand the emergence of concepts of charity. Like charity does not come in the 19th century. It was a result of, charity was a result of 16th, 17th century. The way religion was reinterpreted, religion formed itself in a new way, and there it becomes, charity becomes part of it. And then people with disability got connected to that. They were not initially connected, but later on they got connected. I'll talk about it, all these problems as I lecture proceeds. But for now, what I am supposed to tell you that this idea of blessings, the idea of blessings. Oh, you have a wonderful body, you have a good height, you have a good face, not deformed face. Oh, you are diseased free. So I am sure it's a bliss for you, and there's a blessing of a God of your karma that you did. And then we also have a curse. It is a curse because you have a deformed body, because you have a disabled body. So this is what said, this is what talked about, this is what was interpreted in certain text, and that is what we carry forward, that is what we take it with ourselves. So if you really want to think how does it come from or where does it come from, you have to question these blessings and the idea of the curse. Alright? Moving ahead, we have ancient and medieval culture and traditions. Right? We have ancient and medieval culture and traditions. Very important. What happens here? Look at this. Themes and concept. The column B that we have. Social ostracism in the face of religious exclusion of disabled persons. Social ostracism in the face of religious exclusion of a disabled person. Medical text such as Charak Samhita, disease as a result of wrong action in the past. Bhatt has argued this. That was I was talking in the previous lecture, right? How Bhatt is talking about Charak Samhita and the karma and all. Charak Samhita as instance, right, of a medical knowledge, right? It's like considered to be, that is a very powerful text which speaks about medical understanding that we have in India. Evidence of a moral model of Hindu practices. Prescription of social behavior. Manu's laws, legal precepts, religious prescriptions. King Ashoka's method of a vocational rehabilitation. Instance of a royal administrative governance method. Instance of religious Buddhist influence on governance. Aurangzeb's need to hide his weak knee. Right? These all you get to see through the ancient and medieval culture and traditions. And they are important to explain current reaction to disability in India as a curse or as a shameful feature, and study the history of this negative perception to one's disability being the result of individual fault. You see? So these ancient and medieval culture and traditions, this tradition has already set the tone for negative perception to one's disability being the result of individual fault. So this is whether it's an individual problem, right? This is a individual problem. It's nowhere, we are not responsible for your discrimination. You are responsible because you have a deformed body. So you are responsible because of your deformity. So what we can do? So your exclusion, your segregation is justified, right? This is a way, this treatment, this understanding is coming from ancient and medieval culture and tradition, right? This is where it comes from. Then we are entering into colonial intervention in the form of schools, hospitals and institutions. Now here you see, go back. I referred first the previous one, very old Hindu Islamic text miracles. Then there is a shift we notice in ancient and medieval culture and tradition. And then we have a colonial intervention in the form of schools, hospital institutions, right? So colonial institutions or colonialism changed the entire way to look at disability. It started bringing the institutions which made the situation of people with disability more adverse, more worse, I would say. So colonial intervention in the form of schools and hospitals and institutions. So beginning of a formal care and rehabilitation of disabled people. Disruption of the old order of familial care. Look at this, beginning of the formal care, right? Now family will not take care of you. You have to pay. There are institutions who will be there to help you. Look at the shift that is taking through the colonial intervention in the life of people of India. So beginning of a formal care and rehabilitation of disabled people. Disruption of the old order of familial care. Implementation of segregation of sick and ill persons, methods of modern medicine, isolate the person with disease, disability from community-based care, and this is what they have talked about Arnold, Butt and Miles, right? And then India treated its disabled people as a faulty and punished or cursed. This is a very important, I would say that if you get time, read in detail to know more about every structure, every understanding. In fact, this is helpful to understand disability, caste, gender as well. In every social, I would say, fabric were influenced by colonial administration, colonial ideologies, colonial interventions. Things would have not been, let me reiterate it, things would have not been the same as it is today had colonial ideology would have not taken the shape. You got it? So India treated its disabled people as a faulty and punished or cursed. Colonial modernity reinstated, maligned people to charity, care and rehabilitation. So present attitudes, as a result of traditional fatalistic attitudes and superstitious mindset of Indians, India had a glorious past when disabled people were treated with respect. This was disrupted by British rule. That's the point, right? If you look at the past of people with disability, which means before the colonial intervention and after the colonial intervention, you will see they both ideas are very much different to each other, right? The way we understood disability in pre-colonial time and the way we think about disability in colonial times, or the way they were treated in pre-colonial times and the way they are treated in colonial times or after colonial times, are very different, because colonialism changed the entire understanding of people. It played with our ethos. They went deep to challenge everything, or I would say retry to reshape, regulate everything. So, disability histories in India often resemble similar projects in the West, but significant challenge arise due to distinct cultural themes, ideas and concepts. Scholars face notable difficulties in categorizing certain incidents and subjects within specific thematic frameworks. While these issues might initially seem minor, they pose substantial obstacles to constructing a coherent history of disability in India, revealing deeper insights into cultural differences. A recurring challenge is the tendency to treat texts like the Mahabharata and Manusmriti as equivalent to Western religious texts, such as the Bible. However, this comparison is problematic. Unlike the Bible, which is constrained by doctrinal authority, the Mahabharata, which is open to diverse interpretations and lack prescriptive semantic boundaries, the Manusmriti, while prescriptive, offers context-sensitive guidelines that resist broad universal application. So, see what I'm trying to do, like read these slides one by one, because they all have something significant to contribute. The one of them is talking about that how we have a different ideas of disability in a different context, in different times, and how it was influenced with the outside machineries, right? And then how we can, it's a very difficult to construct a coherent disabled history in India because of the cultural differences which I have already echoed in the beginning of my lectures. And then we have made this point that even if Mahabharata and Manusmriti must not be treated the same as Bible is treated, because Bible is a Western religious text, it's a prescriptive, not Mahabharata. Mahabharata is not prescriptive, it's open to interpretations. Then you will say Manusmriti is prescriptive but context sensitive guideline. So it does not let the explanation become broad and universal. So the Mahabharata exists in various renditions across folklore, stories and text, providing context-specific responses to disability, rather than prescribing fixed social norms. Although characters with disabilities such as those who are blind, hunchbacked or disfigured appear in these stories, each rendition of the Mahabharata presents distinct interpretations reflecting the non-directive nature of the text. So I am just talking about that. Do not pick up the Mahabharata, because Mahabharata does not talk about as if it's a more directive. It's a more non-directive nature of the text. Unlike Western theological text, which often serve as a guides for action, let's say the Mahabharata functions as a narrative collection rather than an explanatory or instructional documents. While it holds cultural significance within Hindu tradition, it does not offer consistent teaching on social behavior or norms, right? It's not that Mahabharata is treated as if it's a teaching on our behavior or norms. It's more instructional, it's more explanatory, it's not prescriptive. So in Asian context, stories typically provide insights into actions suited to a specific situation, but do not function like Western theories, which are inherently explanatory and establish causal relationship. Even texts like Mahabharata are employed within disability discourse as explanatory sources. This results in conceptual misinterpretations. For example, Anita Gay's interpretation of historical figures like Surdas, the blind poet singer, and Astavakra, known for his physical deformities, as symbol of a resistance against disability oppression, can be contested. So these are the simple examples that I am trying to provide to you. These are the simple notion that I picked up to explain to you, right? Just to tell you that how Mahabharata should not be treated as if it is a prescriptive normative text, as if it's a Bible. No, it's open to interpretations, right? This is what I was trying to explain to you. So we have M. Miles, a British scholar deeply invested in the disability history of South Asia. He has conducted extensive research into cultural distinct experience and histories of disability. Like other scholars, Miles referenced texts such as Mahabharata, Manusmriti, and the stories of Surdas to illustrate historical responses to disability. However, he acknowledges that the absence of specific terminology for disabilities in Indian context may apply a lack of such concepts. So Miles interprets this absence as evidence of discrimination. Though he also suggests in one of his essays that disability might have been conceptualized differently in Indian history, despite this recognition, he continues to search for these concepts within religious, legal, medical, and folklore materials, implying that these categories are universally applicable across cultures. Miles also suggests that the cultural difference in disability concepts can only be fully understood if Asian scholars themselves analyze and interpret Asian records and archives. I mean, see, what Miles is suggesting is true not only in the case of disability, in any specific study you have chosen in the context of India. Not by limiting to certain texts, not by looking at to certain available records, but when we are going deeper into the text of disabilities to understand what disability is, how disability is framed, our job is to analyze the entire archives. Our job is to go into the different records to understand how disability was. And this is exactly what Miles is talking about. Because it's very important for us to look at the framework in which we are studying. Every text has a different way to say. Everything, every ideas are different to contribute to us. It's only possible when we look into these important nuances. So to conclude my lecture, I would say that history of disability or disablement in India is very complex. Just by looking at Mahabharata, Ramayana, Manusmriti, if you say that this is what disability is about in entire India, is a problematic understanding of disability. Disability is not what Manusmriti and Mahabharata, or let's say Ramayana, is talking about, or the way they are treating people with disabilities. In fact, we also contested the very view that Mahabharata has multiple interpretations, multiple views to offer. It is instructional but not prescriptive. It's not like a Bible. It must not be treated as if it is a religious text. So therefore, to understand the history of disability, how social attitudes differed and what it is now, what dictates our understanding of disability in current contemporary times, we have to go into different context. It's not that what we see in one place, in one community, is applicable to entire other places as such. That's not true. One place has something else to offer, another place has something else to offer. As I talked about, certain tribes of Andaman and Nicobar has a very different view to look at it. And as I gave very much emphasis on colonial modernity, because the colonial intervention challenged, reshaped the entire Indian thinking pattern. So what disability history or way people were treated before colonial times and after colonial times, they both are dynamically opposite to each other. Alright, so this is why I was putting more emphasis, and I always put emphasis to understand colonial modernity as a broader concept, to understand not only disability but also gender, caste, class, culture, anything that you say. So with this, I would like to end my lecture. Thank you so much for patiently listening to me. See you next time. Bye-bye.